Hi and welcome. I'm Midnight Truth, and it's so nice to have you here tonight, wherever you are right now. Whether you're in bed, lie on the couch, or just looking for a quiet moment, I want you to know this time is for you. Take a deep breath in, and as you breathe out, feel the weight of the day start to fade. Let your mind settle, let your body relax, and let yourself simply be. There's no rush, no pressure, just this calm, quiet moment. If you like, you can close your eyes and imagine yourself in a peaceful place. Maybe it's a cozy room with soft, warm lighting. Or maybe it's under a starry sky, with a gentle breeze brushing against you. Wherever you feel safe and calm, let yourself drift there. I know many of you use these stories to fall asleep. So before we begin, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time is it there? Tonight's story is gentle and soothing, perfect to carry you into a deep, restful sleep. So settle in, get comfortable, and let's begin. When I first saw the house, it looked ordinary, a little old maybe, but nothing unusual. 2 stories, white paint peeling at the edges, a wraparound porch with creaky wooden steps. It had those narrow windows you see in Victorian-era homes, the kind that always seem too tall for the walls. The roof sloped sharply, giving it a slightly hunched appearance, like it had been standing too long and was tired of holding itself up. It wasn't my dream home, but it was what I could afford. And right now, that was all that mattered. The real estate agent, a middle-aged woman named Diane, had been eager to sell it. Too eager. She had that tight, plastic smile stretched across her face the whole time she showed me around, talking a little too fast, glossing over details. The first red flag was the price. Houses like this, even old and creaky ones, didn't go for this cheap. But when I asked why, she just shrugged. "Market's bad," she said. "You got lucky." Lucky. I wasn't sure if that was the right word for it. Still, I signed papers. I needed a fresh start, a new town, a new home, no more looking over my shoulder. The last few months had been messy. I didn't like thinking about it too much. But the short version was this. I had left behind a life that had started to feel like a trap, a relationship that had twisted into something ugly. I needed space, distance, something that didn't remind me of the past. And this house, it was perfect for that. The moving truck arrived on a cold, gray afternoon, the kind of day where the sky felt too low, pressing down like a lid. The trees lining the street were bare, skeletal branches reaching toward the sky. The house stood at the very end of the block, a little too far from its neighbors, like it had been exiled. I spent the next few hours unpacking. The living room was bigger than I expected, with a fireplace that hadn't been used in years. The wooden floors were worn, scratched in places. The kitchen had those old checkered tiles, and when I turned on the faucet, the pipes groaned like they were waking from a deep sleep. It was an old house. Old houses made noise. At least, that's what I told myself. By the time night fell, I was exhausted. I barely had the energy to set up my bed, let alone think about anything else. The air in the house was cold. Not just the kind of cold you feel when the heater isn't working, but something deeper, like the walls themselves held on to the chill. I wrapped myself in blankets, telling myself it was just because the house had been empty for a while. As I lay there in the dark, listening to the wind rattle against the windows, I tried to focus on the positives. I had a whole house to myself. No neighbors on the other side of a thin apartment wall. No one checking up on me. No one watching. I was safe here. And then, in the silence, I heard it. A slow, deliberate sound. Footsteps. Heavy, measured, moving across the hallway outside my room. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. The sound was unmistakable. Someone or something was walking just outside my door. The floorboards groaned under the weight of each step, slow and steady, one after another. I sat up, my heart hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. The house was supposed to be empty. I listened, barely breathing. The footsteps stopped. Silence. I waited, straining to hear anything else. The wind outside, the distant hum of a passing car. Anything to break the thick, suffocating quiet. But there was nothing. I reached for my phone, my fingers shaking, and checked the time. 2:47 a.m. Too late for visitors. too early for my imagination to be playing tricks on me. I swallowed hard and forced myself to move, sliding out of bed as quietly as I could. My bare feet touched the cold floor, and I winced. The wooden planks felt like ice against my skin. I tiptoed to the door, pressing my ear against it. Nothing. I waited a little longer, debating whether I should open it. My brain kept throwing out rational explanations. Maybe the house was settling. Maybe an animal had gotten in. Maybe I was just overtired. But deep down, I knew what I had heard. I placed my hand on the doorknob and turned it slowly. The hallway stretched out before me, dimly lit by the moonlight filtering through the high windows. The wooden floors gleamed. Empty. The old grandfather clock at the end of the hall stood still, its hands frozen at a time that wasn't even close to midnight. There was no one there. No sign that anyone had ever been there. But I knew what I had heard. And somehow, I knew I wasn't alone. The hallway stretched before me, silent and empty. But something felt off. It wasn't just the cold or the stillness. It was the air itself. Thick, heavy, as if the house had been holding its breath. I stood there for a moment, my hand still on the doorknob, listening. My heart pounded in my ears. But beyond that, there was nothing. No footsteps. No whisper of movement. Just silence. I swallowed, forcing myself to take a step forward. The floor groaned beneath me, the sound far too loud in the quiet. I inched toward the stairs, peering down into the darkness below. The living room was nothing but shadows, the furniture vague shapes in the gloom. I gripped the banister, my fingers tightening around the wood. Was someone down there? I took a deep breath and stepped forward. The old wood creaked under my weight, and I flinched at the sound. Each step felt agonizingly slow, like walking through deep water. I reached the bottom and flicked on the light. The living room was empty. I glanced toward the front door, double-checking the locks. Secure, just like I'd left them. I moved through the house, checking the kitchen, the small dining area, even the back door. Nothing was out of place. Nothing suggested an intruder. I ran a hand through my hair and let out a shaky breath. Maybe I really was hearing things. The house was old. Old houses made noise. That was all. I tried to believe it, but I didn't turn the light off when I went back upstairs. The next morning, I forced myself to push aside the unease. Sleep had been scarce, and when I did manage to drift off, I had unsettling dreams. Dark shapes standing at the foot of my bed. The sound of breathing just behind me. I shook it off. It was just my mind playing tricks on me. I spent most of the day unpacking, trying to make the place feel like home. I hung up some pictures, arranged a few pieces of furniture I had, stocked the kitchen. By afternoon, the house felt a little less like a stranger's and a little more like mine. That's when I met her. I was outside, dragging the empty boxes to curb, when I heard a voice behind me. "You're the new owner, huh?" I turned. A woman stood at the edge of my driveway, arms crossed over her chest. She was older, maybe in her late 60s, with short gray hair and sharp eyes that studied me with quiet curiosity. Yeah," I said, brushing my hands off of my jeans. "Just moved in yesterday." She nodded but didn't return my smile. "Not many people stay in that house long," she said. A prickle of unease crawled up my spine. "Why is that?" She gave me a long look, as if deciding whether or not to say more. Then, finally, she shrugged. "Strange things happen. Always have. People hear things, see things." I forced out a chuckle, trying to keep the mood light. Old houses make noise. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Not like this one. Something about the way she said it made my stomach tighten. I glanced back at the house, its white paint dull in the fading afternoon light. The windows stared back at me, dark and empty. I turned back to the woman. "You said people don't stay long. How many owners has this place had?" She hesitated. "More than I can count." I frowned. That wasn't the kind of thing a real estate agent mentioned. Did something happen here? She exhaled slowly. "Last owner before you, a man, mid-30s, moved in about a year ago. He lasted 2 months. What happened? He ran out of the house in the middle of the night." Her eyes darkened. "Barefoot. half-dressed, screaming about something in the walls. A chill ran through me. I forced a laugh, but it sounded weak, and before him, she gave me another long look. A woman, few years back, said she kept waking up to someone standing in her room, but when she turned on the light, she let the sentence hang, unfinished. I swallowed, and before that, she sighed. You sure you want to know? I wasn't, but I nodded. There was a family once. Husband, wife, little girl. Didn't even last 6 months. What happened to them? They left. The way she said it sent a shiver down my spine. Left, not moved, not relocated. Left. I tried to shake it off, but the unease clung to me. I looked at the house again. For the first time, I noticed how the second floor windows seemed off, like they weren't just reflecting the sky, but watching. Take my advice, the woman said. If you hear something at night, don't go looking for it. Then she turned and walked away. That night, I went to bed earlier than usual. I told myself it was because I was tired, that it had nothing to do with the old woman's words. The house was silent, at least at first. Sometime around 2 a.m., I woke up. At first, I wasn't sure why. Then I realized the air had changed. It felt heavier, denser, like something unseen had pressed into the room, pushing against my skin. I stayed perfectly still listening. Then, faintly, from somewhere in the walls, a sound, a low, scratching noise, slow, deliberate, like nails dragging across wood. My breath caught in my throat. I turned on the bedside lamp. The yellow light flooding the room. The noise stopped. I waited. Nothing. My pulse thudded in my ears. My body felt tense, like an animal sensing something it couldn't see. I forced myself to breathe. It was nothing, just the house settling. I turned off the light, laid back down, tried to sleep. Then, just as my eyes started to close, knock, 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 asterisk, asterisk. 3 slow, deliberate knocks from inside the closet. I bolted upright, my heart slamming against my ribs. The closet door sat just a few feet from my bed, slightly ajar, a thin sliver of darkness visible between the frame. I stared at it, my skin crawling. The air felt wrong. I wanted to get up, to check, to prove to myself that nothing was there. But I didn't. I couldn't. I stayed frozen, my breathing shallow, waiting. The silence stretched. Then, knock, 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 asterisk, asterisk. Closer this time. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. And then, from that thin strip of darkness, something breathed back. The breath that came from the closet wasn't mine. It was soft, slow, deliberate, just a whisper of air, but unmistakable. My body locked up, my muscles frozen with instinctive terror, my ears strained, trying to separate the sounds of my own ragged breathing from whatever was in there with me. And then, silence. I reached for the lamp with shaking fingers, but I hesitated before turning it on, because some primal part of me knew that whatever had been breathing in the dark, it was waiting. The moment the light came on, it would be gone, hidden, vanished like a nightmare in the morning sun. And if I turned the light off again, I didn't want to know. Swallowing my fear, I flipped the switch. The room flooded with warm yellow light. The closet door sat still, slightly ajar, revealing only blackness within. Empty. I forced out a shaky breath, trying to convince myself that my mind was playing tricks on me. Sleep deprivation, an overactive imagination, the power of suggestion after that old woman's words. But my body knew the truth. The house wasn't empty, and I wasn't alone. I lay back down, my skin prickling, my back turned firmly away from the closet. Sleep didn't come. I just lay there, listening, waiting, heart pounding in the silence. Somewhere around dawn, exhaustion finally claimed me. The next day, I did what any rational person would do. I tried to act normal. I made coffee. I scrolled through my phone. I forced breakfast down even though my stomach was tied in knots. And I told myself that I had imagined everything. But the house knew I was lying to myself. The morning was quiet, almost too quiet, the kind of silence that felt watched. I moved through the house, trying to distract myself. I organized the kitchen, unpacked a few more boxes, rearranged some furniture, anything to keep my mind busy. But no matter where I went, the feeling of being observed followed me. It wasn't paranoia. It was real. And then, as I was setting up my small bookshelf in the living room, I noticed something strange. The wall behind the shelf. It wasn't solid. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. But when I knocked against it, the sound that came back was hollow, like there was something behind it. I frowned, pressing my palm against the surface. The wallpaper here was slightly different from the rest of the room. Older, more faded. And then I saw it. A thin seam running vertically, barely noticeable. A door that had been sealed shut. A chill crawled up my spine. I stepped back, suddenly feeling like I'd seen too much. Like I had stumbled upon something I wasn't supposed to find. That night, the scratching started again. Only this time, it didn't come from the closet. It came from inside the wall. I barely slept. Every time I started to drift off, the sound would start again, soft, insistent, like fingernails dragging against wood. I couldn't ignore it anymore. The house was trying to tell me something. Or worse, something inside it was trying to get out. By morning, I had made up my mind. I was going to open that hidden door. I spent the next few hours gathering supplies. A flashlight, a screwdriver, a crowbar. My hands were shaking as I pried at the edges of the seam, pulling at the warped wood. It resisted at first, as if reluctant to give up its secrets. But then, with a groan of splintering wood, the door lurched open. A rush of stale, freezing air spilled out, sending shivers down my spine. And beyond the threshold, a narrow staircase, descending into darkness. The space beyond smelled of damp earth and something else. Something rotten. I lifted my flashlight with trembling hands, the beam cutting through the blackness. The stairs were made of old, crumbling wood, leading downward into what looked like a small, hidden basement. I took a step inside. The floor was coated in dust, untouched for years, except my stomach twisted. In the center of the room, clear as day, footprints, fresh, leading from the stairs to the corner of the room where the dust had been disturbed, like someone had been standing there, watching, waiting. I lifted my flashlight higher, dread curdling in my gut, and that's when I saw it, against the far wall, beneath layers of dust and cobwebs. A chair, an old wooden chair, with ropes still tied to the arms and legs. And beneath it, half buried in the dirt floor, a journal. I hesitated before reaching for it. The leather cover was cracked and dry, the edges curled with age. The second my fingers brushed it, a sharp chill shot up my arm. I exhaled slowly and opened the book. The pages were filled with frantic, scrawled handwriting. At first, none of it made sense. Asterisk, asterisk, ramblings about shadows, voices, doors that open on their own. Asterisk, asterisk. But the further I read, the more the words shifted. They became warnings. It wants out. It speaks to me at night. Do not answer when it knocks. My heart pounded against my ribs. I turned another page, hands trembling. I sealed the door. It was the only way. If you find this, asterisk, asterisk, do not let it out. I went cold. And then, knock, 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 asterisk, asterisk, from directly behind me, from inside the room. I turned, and something was standing there, something that had been waiting. And this time, it wasn't hiding anymore. I couldn't breathe. The air inside the hidden room was thick, oppressive. Asterisk, asterisk, alive. Asterisk, asterisk, my flashlight trembled in my grip, the beam flickering across the dust-coated walls, the old chair, the journal, and the thing standing in the darkness. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't help it. It was just beyond the edge of the light, its shape indistinct, shifting, a shadow with weight, a presence that pressed against my skin, crawling into my bones. And then it moved, not with footsteps, not with any sound at all, just a slow, unnatural glide closer. The journal slipped from my fingers. I took a step back. It took a step forward. The air turned frigid, colder than the dead of winter. My breath came out in short, ragged gasps, misting in the flashlight beam. I tried to convince myself that this wasn't real, that my mind was playing tricks on me, twisting the shadows into something impossible. But then it spoke. A voice, dry as crumbling paper, low and wrong, like something learning how to sound human. Asterisk, you found it. Asterisk, a sharp, electric bolt of terror shot through me. The words crawled into my ears, skittering through my skull. I turned and ran. My feet slammed against the stairs, breath burning in my chest. I reached the top, shoved through the hidden door, and threw my weight against it, slamming it shut, locking whatever was in there back inside. The silence that followed was worse, because I could still feel it, waiting, listening, and then something knocked from the other side. Soft, patient, like it had all the time in the world. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room with all the lights on, my back against the farthest wall, my eyes locked on the hidden door. But it didn't open. Nothing came through. By morning, I convinced myself that whatever was down there, whatever I had seen, asterisk, asterisk, was still trapped. Asterisk, asterisk. And I needed to keep it that way. I had to leave this house. But when I tried, the house wouldn't let me go. It started small. Keys going missing. Doors sticking shut even though they never had before. My phone refusing to hold a charge. And then, the voices. At first, I thought they were just in my head. Murmurs at the edge of sleep. Whispers tangled in the wind outside. But then I started hearing them clearly. Asterisk, you found it. Asterisk, asterisk, you let it out. Asterisk, asterisk, it's in the house now. Asterisk, I tried to drown them out, playing music, leaving the TV on, anything to fill the silence. But the whispers found me. And then, the worst night yet. I woke up at exactly 3:12 a.m. Not because of the sound, but because of the feeling. Something was in the room with me. I didn't move, didn't even breathe. The air was ice cold, my breath misting in the dark. The blankets felt too heavy, like an unseen weight pressing against my body. And then, the mattress shifted, like something was crawling onto the bed. Slow, deliberate. I squeezed my eyes shut, every muscle in my body screaming at me to run, to move. But I couldn't. The presence leaned in close. The air changed. Asterisk, asterisk, a breath against my ear. Asterisk, asterisk. And then, in that same paper dry voice. Asterisk, you shouldn't have opened the door. Asterisk, the blankets ripped away from me. I bolted upright, gasping, and the room was empty. But the closet door, the one I had locked, the one I had been keeping shut every single night, was wide open, and inside the darkness breathed. I didn't stay in that room. The second I saw the open closet, I ran. Down the hall, down the stairs, my breath coming out in ragged gasps. I didn't stop until I reached the living room, slamming the door behind me, locking it, though I knew that wouldn't help. Not against this. The house was different now. Wrong. It wasn't just old with creaking anymore. It wasn't just the wind pressing against the windows. It was alive. Every shadow stretched too far. Every door sat just slightly ajar, like it was waiting. And the whispers were everywhere. Not just one voice anymore. Many, crawling along the walls, sinking into the floorboards. Asterisk, he let out. Asterisk, asterisk, he opened the door. Asterisk, asterisk, he has to stay. Asterisk. I pressed my hands against my ears, forcing myself to breathe, to think. I had to leave. Now, I grabbed my keys, my phone, my jacket, and then I ran for the front door. My fingers closed around the handle, and it wouldn't turn. I yanked harder. Nothing. I twisted the deadbolt, checked the lock. Asterisk, asterisk, it wasn't locked. Asterisk, asterisk. The door just wouldn't open, like it was holding me in. Panic rose in my chest. I ran to the windows, trying to force them open. Asterisk, asterisk, sealed shut. Asterisk, asterisk. I tried another door. Nothing. Every exit refused to open, and that's when I felt it. A shift in the air. A presence. Something was behind me. I turned, and at the far end of the hallway, it stood there. Not a shadow this time. A figure. Tall. Hollow. Its face stretched into something not human. And then it moved. Not with footsteps. It just slid forward. Fast. Too fast. I barely had time to react. I ran, sprinted, toward the stairs, taking them two at a time. I didn't know where I was going, just that I had to get away. The whispers grew louder. The air turned freezing. By the time I reached my room, I could barely feel my fingers. My breath came out in short, frantic clouds. I slammed the door shut and locked it, and then I heard it, on the other side. Slow, scraping, something dragging its nails against the wood. And then, in that dry, crumbling voice, there is no way out. I didn't sleep. I sat in the corner of the room, heart pounding, flashlight shaking in my grip. I don't know how long I stayed like that. Hours. Maybe ***. By the time the sun finally rose, the whispers had stopped. The air was warm again. The house felt normal, but I knew better. I wasn't safe. Not as long as I was still here. I tried to leave again that morning, but the door still wouldn't open. I called a locksmith. He never showed up. I tried calling the police. The call wouldn't go through. I texted a friend. No reply. The world outside the house. Who was slipping away. Like I wasn't part of it anymore. Like I was somewhere else. Trapped. That night, I did the only thing I could think of. I went back to the hidden room. I needed answers. I needed to know what this house was. What wanted. The journal was still there, exactly where I had dropped it. The pages were stiff with age, the ink faded, but I could still read it. And the more I read, the more my stomach twisted. The house's original owner, he wasn't just obsessed with the occult. He had been trying to bind something here. A presence, a shadow, something that existed in the spaces between. He had written about how it whispered to him, how it promised secrets. But in the end, he was the one who disappeared. And every person who had lived here since, they disappeared, too, one by one, until there was nothing left of them. Like the house swallowed them whole. My hands were shaking. I turned to the last page. A single sentence had been scrawled there, over and over, the handwriting growing more frantic. It won't let me leave. I slammed the journal shut, and then the door behind me creaked open. The air turned to ice, and something stepped inside. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Every nerve in my body screamed to move, to run. But where? The house wouldn't let me leave. The doors wouldn't open. The windows were sealed. And now it was in the room with me. I could hear it. A slow, shuddering breath. Like something trying to remember how to breathe. The air behind me shifted. A presence. Tall, cold, wrong. It wasn't just standing there. It was waiting for me to turn around, for me to see it. But I wouldn't. I couldn't. Every instinct told me that if I looked, if I acknowledged it, that would be the end. It would take me like it had taken the others. I squeezed my eyes shut. Think. The journal. The man who lived here before, he had written about rituals, about binding. Maybe there was a way to undo it, a way to break whatever was keeping me here. The journal was still clutched in my hands. My fingers were shaking as I flipped through the pages, searching. Somewhere, buried in all of this, had to be a way to end this. And then, I found it, a passage, nearly unreadable. The ink smudged the words frantic. The door must be closed. It must be forced shut. Fire. Salt, the blood of the one it seeks. My breath caught. It was trying to take me. That meant I was the key. I had to seal it inside. I didn't know if it would work. I didn't know if I'd even survive it. But I was out of options. I took a slow breath. And then, for the first time, I turned around. It wasn't human. It had never been human. Its face was wrong. Like someone had tried to stretch human skin over something that wasn't supposed to wear it. Its mouth, asterisk, asterisk, too wide, asterisk, asterisk. Its hands, asterisk, asterisk, too long, asterisk, asterisk. And its eyes, hollow, black, endless, asterisk, asterisk. I felt something pulling at me, a force. It wasn't just looking at me, asterisk, asterisk. It was dragging me in, asterisk, asterisk. My limbs went stiff. My thoughts blurred. Come with me, it whispered. Its voice wrapped around my brain like silk. It would be easy to let go, to let it take me, like it had taken all the others. But I fought it. I bit my tongue, hard enough to draw blood. The pain snapped me back. I moved. I grabbed the can of salt I had taken from the kitchen and threw it down. A line between me and it. The thing stopped. Hissed. The salt. Asterisk, asterisk, it worked. Asterisk, asterisk. I didn't hesitate. I ran. Through the halls. Down the stairs. My pulse pounding. My breath ragged. The whispers rose. The shadows shifted. It knew what I was trying to do. And it was angry. I reached the fireplace. Shaking hands. Heart hammering. I grabbed the matches. I could feel it behind me. Coming. The whole house groaned. The walls buckled. It was trying to stop me. I struck the match. Dropped it into the fireplace. Flames roared to life. And the thing behind me, it screamed. A sound that wasn't human. That had never been human. The shadows pulled inward. The house shook. And then, silence. For the first time since I moved in, the house was quiet. I don't remember how long I sat there, listening, waiting, but it was gone. I knew it in my bones. The weight in the air was gone. The whispers were gone. The house, it was just a house again. And when I walked to the front door, this time when I turned the handle, it opened. I stepped outside. Cold air, morning light, and the first breath of freedom I'd had in weeks. I left everything behind. My clothes, my furniture, even the journal. I didn't want anything from that house. I just walked, and I never looked back. 2 weeks later, I saw the listing. For sale. No mention of what had happened. No mention of the people who had disappeared. Just a freshly painted house, waiting for its next tenant. And in the photo, the front door was open, waiting for whoever came next. I left. But the house never really let me go. For days, I carried its weight with me. The shadows under my eyes grew darker. Sleep was an impossible thing. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that face, stretched, hollow, waiting. I checked into a motel outside town, paid in cash, and didn't leave a room for 3 days. The cheap curtains let in slivers of neon light from the sign outside, and I spent hours staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself it was over, that I had won. But I hadn't. The first sign came on the third night. I was dozing off, half buried under motel blankets, when something jolted me awake. A sound, a single, sharp creak, like a footstep on old wood. My heart stopped. I told myself it was a motel settling, that cheap places like this always had weird noises. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't a motel, that it was following me. I sat up, staring at the dark corners of the room. Nothing moved, nothing changed, but I could feel something, like a presence just beyond my line of sight. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I packed my bags and left. I didn't know where I was going, just that it had to be far from that house, far from anything that might remind me of it. But some things don't stay behind. Some things cling. I drove for hours, barely stopping. The road stretched endlessly in front of me, my hands locked on the wheel. I didn't listen to music, didn't check my phone, just kept moving, as if I could outrun the thing that still lingered in the back of my mind. But that night, in another cheap motel, it happened again. I was brushing my teeth, staring at my exhausted reflection in the bathroom mirror. when I noticed it. The door, I had left it open, just a crack, but now it was wider. I froze. The air changed. The cheap fluorescent light above me flickered. Just for a second, I swallowed hard, gripping the edge of the sink. It wasn't possible. It wasn't possible. I turned slowly, my pulse thudding in my ears. The door was open just enough to see the dark beyond it. And then, a whisper. Not words. Not exactly. Just a sound. Soft. Faint. But there. I backed up until my heels hit the bathtub. My mind raced. This wasn't the house. It couldn't be. But deep down I knew it had found me. I wasn't free. I had never been free. I grabbed my things and left within minutes. Didn't check out. Didn't even turn off the lights. Just got in my car and drove. This time, I didn't stop for a long, long time. But no matter how far I went, the feeling never left. Like something just behind me, waiting, watching. And the worst part? I had no idea what it wanted. But I knew one thing. It wasn't finished with me yet. The further I drove, the heavier the feeling became. Like something unseen was pressing against my back, just outside my field of vision. I kept checking the rear view mirror, expecting to see something sitting in the back seat. A shape, a shadow, a face. But there was nothing. Nothing but my own reflection, pale and exhausted, staring back at me. I told myself I was being paranoid, that it was just my mind playing tricks. But deep down I knew it was still with me. By the time I pulled into another town, I felt like I hadn't slept in days. My hands were shaking as I parked in a random gas station, the neon lights buzzing overhead. I needed a plan. I needed help. That's when I remembered the old woman from the antique shop, the one who had warned me about the house. I fumbled for my phone and searched for the town's name. It wasn't far, a few hours at most. Something told me she would have answers. I didn't waste time. I grabbed a coffee, got back on the road, and drove straight there. By the time I arrived, the sky was dark, the streets empty. The town looked smaller than I remembered, swallowed in the glow of dim streetlights. The antique shop was still there, but something felt off. The windows were dark, the open sign flipped to closed. I parked anyway, stepping out of the car and into the cool night air. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, harder this time. Nothing. A flicker of doubt crept in. Had I waited too long? Had something happened to her? I was about to turn away when the door creaked open, just an inch. A single, I peered through the gap. Then recognition. She opened the door fully, pulling me inside with surprising strength. "You shouldn't have come back," she whispered, locking the door behind me. Her shop smelled of dust and old paper. Shelves lined with strange trinkets. Candles flickered in the dim space, casting shadows that seemed to move on their own. "You saw it, didn't you?" she asked, eyes sharp. I swallowed hard. It followed me. She nodded like she already knew, like she had been expecting this. "Tell me everything," she said. And so I did. I told her about the footsteps, the whispers, the thing I had seen in the mirror. I told her about the motel door opening on its own, the feeling of being watched. She listened, her face unreadable. When I finished, she let out a slow breath. "You didn't just live in that house," she said. "You woke it up." I felt a cold chill crawl down my spine. "What does it want?" I asked. She hesitated. Then finally, she said, "It doesn't want the house." Her gaze locked onto mine. "It wants you." The air seemed to thicken around me. I gripped the edge of the counter. "What do I do?" For the first time, she looked uncertain. "There might be a way," she said, "but it won't be easy." I didn't care. I would do anything to be free. She reached under the counter, pulling out an old, tattered book. "First," she said, flipping through the brittle pages, "you need to understand what you're dealing with." Her finger landed on an illustration, faded but unmistakable. It was the face from the mirror. I felt the blood drain from my face. I wasn't imagining it. It was real, and it had already marked me. My breath caught in my throat as I stared at the illustration. The face, asterisk, asterisk, it's asterisk, asterisk face, was crude but unmistakable. Hollowed eyes, a mouth stretched too wide, a grotesque, inhuman grin. I had seen it. I had felt it. And now it was here, in this old book, as if it had been waiting for me to find it. I looked up at the old woman. "What is it?" She ran her fingers over the yellow pages, her lips pressed into a thin line. "It has no name," she said. "Not one that should ever be spoken aloud." My stomach twisted. "But what is it?" I asked again. Her eyes flickered to mine. "Something old, something forgotten." I swallowed hard. "And it's after me." She nodded. "It attached itself to you the moment you stepped into that house. Maybe even before that. You stayed too long, listened too closely." Her gaze darkened. "You let it see you." I felt sick. "So how do I get rid of it?" She hesitated. Then she turned the book toward me, tapping at the faded writing beneath the illustration. "It doesn't haunt places," she said. "It haunts people." The words blurred in my vision. "You mean..." My voice was barely a whisper. "You could burn the house to the ground," she said, "and it wouldn't matter. It doesn't need the house anymore. It needs you." A cold, sinking dread settled in my gut. I had left the house, but it had never left me. I shook my head, forcing myself to focus. "What do I have to do?" She exhaled, long and slow. "There's a ritual," she said finally, "but it's dangerous." "Tell me?" She flipped more pages, stopping at another section of the book. The text was smudged with age. The ink faded but still legible. "You have to sever the connection," she said. "Cut it off before it consumes you completely." "How?" She met my gaze. "You have to face it." A deep, instinctive fear coiled inside me. "That thing," my voice caught, "it's not human." "No," she said, "it isn't." I gripped the edge of the counter. "Then how do I fight it?" Her expression darkened. "You don't fight it. You survive it." The word sent a chill through me. I glanced back at the book, reading the passage beneath the drawing. The instructions were written in a language I didn't understand, but the meaning was clear enough. I would have to go back to the house, back to where it all began. I swallowed hard. "What happens if I don't?" She looked at me with something almost like pity. "It will take you." The room felt unbearably small, the air too thick to breathe. I wanted to run, but deep down, I knew there was nowhere left to go. It would always find me, no matter how far I ran, no matter how long I hid. It would never stop, unless I stopped it first. The words hung heavy in the air between us. "It will take you." Something inside me rebelled against them, against the finality in her tone. I clenched my fists, forcing my breath to steady. "No," I said, "I won't let that happen." The old woman studied me for a long moment, as if deciding whether I was strong enough or foolish enough to mean it. Then, with a sigh, she turned another page of the book. "The ritual must be done at the place where the connection was made," she said. "That means going back to the house." My stomach twisted. I had known this was coming, but hearing out loud made it feel real. I had barely escaped that place, and now she wanted me to return? Is there any other way? I asked. She shook her head. "No." A cold dread settled in my bones. "Once you're inside," she continued, "you must confront it, acknowledge it, speak to it. The more you run, the stronger it becomes. The more you fear it, the tighter its grip." I thought about the thing I had seen in the mirror, the way it had grinned at me, the way it had moved like it was wearing my skin, stretching my features into something grotesque. "I don't think I can do that," I admitted. "Every time I see it, I freeze." She nodded. "That's what it wants. It thrives on fear, on uncertainty. The moment you hesitate, it burrows deeper. That's why the ritual is dangerous." I swallowed hard. "What happens if I fail?" The old woman hesitated. Then quietly she said, "Then you won't be the same when you walk out of that house. If you walk out at all." I shuddered. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The shop was silent, save for the quiet crackling of a candle's flame. Shadows flickered across the walls, making the space feel smaller, tighter. Then finally I asked, "What do I have to do?" She turned back the book and began listing the steps. You'll need to take something from the house, she said. Something personal. An object that belonged to it. I frowned. To it? You mean the presence in the house? The thing that's attached to you? I thought about the journal I had found. The one filled with ramblings about the previous owner's rituals. Was that enough? Or was there something else I had overlooked? She continued. Once you have the object, you'll draw a circle of salt around yourself. Salt is a barrier. It won't stop it, but it will slow it down. Then what? She hesitated. Then you call it by name. I stiffened. You just said it didn't have a name. She exhaled. Not one that should be spoken aloud. But it has a name for you. It's been whispering it to you, hasn't it? My throat tightened. I thought back to the nights in that house, to the hushed murmurs just beyond my bedroom door. I had never been able to make out the words, but I had felt them crawling under my skin, pressing against my mind like an unseen hand. A name. I had heard it, but I had never dared to repeat it. You know it, she said, watching me closely. Don't you? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Speak it, she continued. Acknowledge it. And when it appears, you must not look away. You must not run. My breath turned shallow. That's when you sever the connection, she said. You burn the object. You break the link. And when it reaches for you, when it tries to pull you in, you reject it. You must show it that you are not afraid. I stared at her. That's it. I asked, voice hollow. I just tell it no? She shook her head. No. You make it believe it has no power over you. You convince yourself, even if you don't feel it. A silence stretched between us. Then, finally, I nodded. I'll do it. The old woman didn't look convinced. Most people don't come back from something like this, she warned. You've already let it in too deep. Then I don't have a choice, I said. Do I? She watched me for a long moment. Then at last, she sighed. Come with me, she said. She led me to a wooden chest in the back of the shop, covered in dust and strange carvings. When she opened it, the air inside smelled of herbs and something old, something almost metallic. She pulled out a small, cloth-wrapped bundle and handed it to me. It was heavier than I expected. This is for protection, she said. It won't stop it, but it will help you keep your mind clear. I unwrapped it, revealing a bundle of dried herbs tied together with twine. Beneath them was a small, rusted iron ring. What is this? I asked. The ring is iron, she said. It grounds you. The herbs are for clarity. Burn them when the time is right. I clenched my fist around the items. This was real. This was happening. I was going back. And I was going to end this. I tucked the items into my pocket and turned to leave. Before I could step outside, the old woman grabbed my wrist, her grip surprisingly strong. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw something close to fear in them. Be careful, she whispered. It already knows what you're planning. A chill ran down my spine. I didn't look back. I stepped outside, back into the cold night air, and then I drove, straight toward the house, straight toward whatever was waiting for me. The drive back to the house felt longer than I remembered. The trees lining the road looked darker, their twisted branches clawing at the night sky. The headlights carved a narrow tunnel of visibility, but beyond that, everything was swallowed in shadow. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my mind racing. The old woman's words echoed in my head. It already knows what you're planning. A part of me wanted to turn around, to drive as far away as possible, but that wasn't an option. Not anymore. I was too deep in this. And if I didn't end it now, I never would. The house loomed as I pulled into the driveway. It looked different somehow. Not just dark, but hollow, like something had been drained from it. Or maybe something had woken up. I killed the engine and sat there for a long moment, my breath fogging against the windshield. Then, slowly I stepped out. The wind had died down completely, leaving the air unnaturally still. Even the insects were silent. I reached into my pocket, fingers brushing against a bundle of herbs and the iron ring, my only protection. I took a deep breath and started toward the front door. The house creaked as I stepped inside, the sound stretching through the empty rooms. It smelled different. Asterisk, asterisk, rotting. Asterisk, asterisk, like something old and would have been left to decay. I swallowed against the rising nausea and forced myself forward. The first step was retrieving the object, something that had belonged to it. I knew exactly where to look. The journal. I had left it in the bedroom, tucked under a loose floorboard. I moved cautiously, ears straining for any sound, any shift in the air. But the house was silent. Too silent. The bedroom door stood slightly ajar, just as I had left it, but something about it felt off. I pushed it open and froze. The floorboard where I had hidden the journal was already lifted. The wooden plank lay beside it, revealing the dark space beneath. Someone, asterisk, asterisk, or something asterisk, asterisk, had already been here. A cold dread curled around my ribs. I stepped inside, forcing my legs to move. The journal was still there, but the cover was open now. Pages fanned out as if someone had rifled through them. My fingers trembled as I reached down and picked it up. The pages were covered in that same frantic handwriting. But something was different. Some of the words had changed. No, not changed. New words had appeared. I scanned the page, my pulse hammering, and then I saw it. One single sentence, written over and over, in shaking, desperate strokes. I see you. I see you. I see you. Asterisk, asterisk. A breath hitched in my throat. The whisper came from behind me, low, crawling, almost amused. Do you? I spun around. The mirror on the opposite wall showed my reflection, but something was wrong. It was me, but it wasn't. My reflection was smiling. I wasn't. The grin stretched impossibly wide, eyes black and empty. And then it moved. Not my movement, not a reflection. It took a step forward, closer. I stumbled back, slamming against the dresser. My breath came in sharp, ragged gasps. No, this isn't real. Asterisk, asterisk. The air in the room grew heavy, thick like tar. My limbs felt sluggish, like something was pulling me down. The figure in the mirror tilted its head, its lips parted, and then it stepped out. The glass rippled like water, and suddenly, asterisk, asterisk was there, asterisk, asterisk, standing in the room with me. My breath froze in my throat. It looked like me, but it wasn't me. Its limbs were wrong, too long, too sharp. Its grin never wavered. And then it whispered in my own voice, "You can't leave." My body reacted before my mind could. I lunged for the bundle of herbs in my pocket, my fingers fumbling as I struck a match and held it to the dried leaves. A thick, bitter smoke curled into the air. The thing hissed. Its grin faltered for the first time. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed the iron ring, clutching it so tightly it bit into my palm. "You don't own me," I said, forcing the words through gritted teeth. "You never did." The thing twitched. The walls groaned. The floor shook. It was angry now. "You invited me in," it whispered. "You let me in. You are mine." I stepped forward, heart pounding. "No," I said. "You are nothing." Its grin vanished. A sound split through the room. A shriek, high and warped, as if it were being torn apart. The shadows around it convulsed, writhing like something alive. The walls cracked, and then it collapsed. The thing crumbled inward, folding into itself, until it was nothing but a smear of darkness on the floor. The room fell silent. I stood there, gasping, the iron ring still clutched in my fist. It was gone, but I knew better. The air felt lighter, but not empty, not safe, not yet. I turned to the journal still in my other hand. The pages were blank now, except for one sentence, written in a slow, deliberate hand. Not yet. A shiver crawled down my spine. I didn't wait. I ran, out of the bedroom, down the stairs, through the front door. I didn't stop running until I was in my car, the engine roaring to life beneath my shaking hands. The house stood silent behind me, but as I pulled away, I saw it, a shadow in the upstairs window, watching, waiting, smiling. I didn't stop driving until the house was miles behind me. My hands trembled on the wheel, my breath coming in sharp, Ragged gasps. The town stretched out in the rearview mirror, its quiet streets swallowed by the night. I wasn't thinking about where I was going, only that I had to get away. The highway was empty, the kind of emptiness that made you feel alone in the worst possible way. The sky was black, the stars swallowed by thick clouds. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles white. I kept glancing at the rearview mirror, expecting to see something, a shadow in the back seat, a grin that wasn't mine. But there was nothing, not yet. I didn't stop until I reached a small roadside motel. The vacancy sign buzzed dimly in the darkness. The place looked old, the kind of place people pass through without a second thought. That was what I needed, just for one night. I parked and stepped out, my legs unsteady beneath me. The air felt colder than it should have. The lobby was empty except for a tired-looking man behind the counter. His eyes barely lifted from the small TV playing in the corner as I approached. "Room?" he asked. "Yeah." My voice came out hoarse. "Just for tonight." He slid a key across the counter without asking any questions. I paid in cash. The room smelled like stale cigarettes and old wood, the kind of smell that had settled into the walls over decades. But I didn't care. I locked the door, bolted it, shoved a chair under the handle for good measure. Only then did I let myself breathe. The journal was still in my bag. I hadn't opened it since leaving the house. I didn't want to, but I had to. With shaking hands, I pulled it out and flipped to the last page. The words stared back at me. Not yet. My stomach twisted. I turned the page, and my breath stopped. There was new writing. "Welcome home." I felt the blood drain from my face. My heart pounded against my ribs. And then the light flickered. The air shifted, and I heard it. A slow, deliberate creak. The sound of footsteps. Inside the room. I turned, my body rigid. The closet door stood slightly ajar. I hadn't touched it. The light flickered again, and in that brief, stuttering glow, I saw it. A shadow, standing just behind the door, watching me, smiling. The light went out completely, and the last thing I heard before the darkness swallowed me was my own voice, laughing. Story 2. Moving into a new place should have felt like a fresh start, a chance to rebuild, to move on. That's what I told myself when I signed the lease. The house was old, sure, but it had character. High ceilings, wooden floors, a wraparound porch that creaked underfoot. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. After the divorce, I needed something new, a place where I could be alone. But from the moment I stepped inside, something fell off. I ignored it at first. The way the air felt too still. The way the house seemed too quiet, like it was waiting. I blamed my nerves. A new house always came with its share of creaks and groans, right? Just the sounds of settling wood, drafts sneaking through unseen cracks. That's what I told myself. That's what I had to believe. The first night was uneventful. I unpacked a few boxes, made myself a weak cup of coffee, and sat on the couch, staring at my phone, scrolling without really seeing anything. I was exhausted, but when I finally crawled into bed, sleep didn't come easily. The house was too silent. No distant hum of city traffic. No neighbors arguing through thin walls. Just me, the dark, and the sound of my own breathing. I must have drifted off at some point, because I woke to something strange. A sound, a whisper, soft, muffled, like someone speaking just outside my room. I sat up, heart pounding. Listened. Silence. I told myself it was a dream, a trick of my half-asleep mind. But then I heard it again. This time, it came from the hallway. A low, shuffling sound, like feet dragging across the wooden floor. I held my breath. The sound stopped. For a long time, I didn't move. And then, asterisk, asterisk tap, asterisk, asterisk. A soft knock at my bedroom door. I nearly screamed. I stared at the door, waiting. Another knock. I reached for my phone. Checked the time. 3:12 a.m. No missed calls. No messages. Nothing but the quiet weight of the house pressing down on me. I forced myself to breathe, to think. Old houses make noises, with shifts, pipes groan. Maybe something had fallen over in another room. I was alone. I had to be alone. I didn't sleep after that. When morning came, I convinced myself I had imagined the whole thing. The exhaustion, the stress of moving, it all messed with my head. By noon, I was unpacking boxes in the kitchen when I heard a knock at the front door. I jumped, heart racing. I opened it to find a woman standing on the porch. Late 50s, maybe early 60s. Gray streaked hair tied back in a loose braid. Deep lines around her mouth and eyes. She wore an old cardigan, her hands tucked into the sleeves like she was cold. She stared at me for a long moment. "You moved in," she finally said. I nodded. "Yeah, yesterday." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Didn't take long." My stomach tightened. "Didn't take long for what?" She hesitated. Then she glanced past me. "Into the house?" "You hear it yet?" she asked softly. I felt a chill creep up my spine. "Hear what?" Her eyes darkened. "The footsteps." I felt a weight settle in my chest. My skin prickled. I forced a smile. "I don't know what you mean." She exhaled, shaking her head. "They never tell you, do they?" Something about the way she said it made my hands clench into fists. "I should go," I said quickly, stepping back. She didn't move. "They won't let you," she murmured. I froze. "Who?" She took a step closer, lowered her voice. "You should leave before it's too late." Then, without another word, she turned and walked away. I shut the door, bolted it, tried to shake the uneasy feeling crawling up my spine. The house felt different now, like something inside it had woken up, and it was listening. I tried to put the woman's words out of my mind. People talk. They make up stories. Small towns love their legends, their ghost stories. And I had enough on my plate without letting some superstitious old woman get inside my head. But as the day wore on, something about the house kept nagging at me. It was too still, even with the windows open. The air inside felt stale. I found myself moving through the room slower than before, hesitating before stepping into dark spaces. It wasn't something I could explain, just a creeping feeling, like someone had been in these rooms before me, and like they still were. By evening, I was exhausted. I made myself a sandwich I barely tasted, then settled on the couch to watch something, anything to distract myself. But my eyes kept drifting toward the hallway, toward my bedroom door. It felt ridiculous. Paranoid. I was alone. The house was just old. I forced myself to laugh at my own nerves, shaking my head as I turned off the TV. Get a grip, I muttered to myself. I went to bed early, determined to sleep off the unease. But at 3:00 a.m., I woke to the sound of footsteps. They were slow, measured, moving down the hall. My throat tightened. I lay there frozen, staring at the ceiling, listening. The steps were close, right outside my door. I held my breath. Silence. The air felt thick, pressing against my skin. Then, asterisk, asterisk tap, asterisk, asterisk. That same soft knock, barely audible, like someone just resting their knuckles against the wood. I squeezed my eyes shut. No, I'm imagining it. Asterisk, asterisk. I counted to 10 in my head. It's just the house settling, just the wind, just a dream. Asterisk, asterisk. Then I heard the doorknob rattle. My stomach flipped. I bolted upright, heart hammering. And then, just as suddenly as it started, silence. The air in the room felt colder. I sat there for what felt like hours, waiting, barely breathing. But the sound never came again. By morning, I almost convinced myself I had imagined it. Almost, until I went into the hallway and saw the footprints. They were faint but unmistakable. Asterisk, asterisk, dust disturbed on the wooden floor. Asterisk, asterisk, leading from my bedroom door, back down the hall, and stopping in front of the attic hatch. The one I hadn't even noticed until now. I stared up at it, my pulse pounding in my ears. A simple wooden door in the ceiling, with pull cord hanging down. Waiting. I swallowed hard. The woman's words came back to me. Didn't take long. A shiver ran down my spine. I needed to know what was up there. I had to know. Even if I already had a feeling, I wasn't going to like what I found. I stood under the attic hatch, staring up at the thin cord dangling from the ceiling. My pulse throbbed in my ears. The footprints stopped here. Whoever, asterisk, asterisk, whatever asterisk, asterisk, had been moving through the house had gone up there. But that didn't make sense. I hadn't opened the attic. I hadn't even noticed it was there until now. And yet, someone had walked straight to it. I took a slow step back. My instinct screamed at me to leave it alone, to turn around, pretend I'd never seen it, and go about my day like nothing was wrong. But that wasn't going to happen, was it? Because I had to know. I needed to know. I grabbed a chair from the kitchen and positioned it under the hatch. The wood creaked under my weight as I stepped onto it, reaching for the cord. I hesitated. What if I pulled it and something pulled back? I shook the thought off. Ridiculous. Taking a deep breath, I yanked the cord. The attic door swung down with a groan. A cold breath of air swept over me, raising goosebumps along my arms. The smell hit me next. Asterisk, asterisk dust, old wood, and something damp. Asterisk, asterisk, something that made my stomach tighten. I stared up into the darkness. The attic was just a gaping black void above me. A thin, rickety ladder unfolded from the hatch. I had a choice. Climb up or walk away. Everything in me screamed to walk away, but my hand was already gripping the ladder's edge. I climbed. The wooden rungs felt brittle under my hands. The attic swallowed me in darkness as I pulled myself up. The air was thick with dust, particles dancing in the narrow slant of moonlight, filtering through a single cracked window. At first, I saw nothing but shadows and forgotten things. Old furniture draped in sheets. A rocking chair with one broken leg. Stacks of yellowed newspapers that should have crumbled to dust years ago. And then I saw it. A small wooden chest pushed against the far wall. Something about it unnerved me. It wasn't covered in dust like everything else. Someone had touched it recently. I swallowed hard, moving closer. The lid was slightly ajar. My breath hitched as I reached out, fingers trembling, and slowly pushed it open. Inside was a bundle of old papers, and on top of them, a leather-bound journal. I picked it up. The cover was cracked with age, the pages inside brittle and yellowed. And when I flipped it open, I froze, because on the very first page, in faded ink, was a name, Edgar Winslow, the original owner of the house. And beneath it, scrawled in messy, hurried handwriting, "The door's open. I can't close it. God help me." A chill crawled through me. I turned another page, and another. The entries were short, desperate. I hear them at night, moving through the walls. They whisper in my sleep. I wake up and the room is colder. Something is wrong with the house. The rituals didn't work. I should never have. Asterisk, asterisk. The writing cut off abruptly. My stomach twisted. I knew what I was reading. A warning. The attic suddenly felt too small, the air too thick. A creak sounded behind me. I whipped around. Nothing. Just the dark. I was alone. I told myself that. Over and over. I was alone. But as I climbed down the ladder, as I shut the attic hatch, as I stood in my empty hallway, clutching the journal to my chest, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been up there with me, watching, waiting, and now it knew I had found the journal. I sat at the kitchen table, the journal in front of me. My hands were still shaking. The house was quiet now, too quiet, like it was waiting. I didn't want to read it, but I had to. I flipped to the next page. I made a mistake. The ink was smudged in places, as if written with an unsteady hand. It wasn't supposed to be real. I thought I was just playing, testing. I thought the old ways were myths, stories, but I was wrong. I swallowed hard. What old ways? I followed the steps exactly. The symbols, the words. I didn't believe in them. Not really, but the house believed. It woke something up, and now I can't undo it. A sudden gust of wind rattled the window. I jumped. I glanced toward the hallway, toward the attic hatch. My skin crawled. I turned back to the journal. At first, it was small things, objects moving when I wasn't looking. whispers in empty rooms, a shadow passing through the mirrors. I told myself I was imagining it, that the house was just old. But then I started waking up in different places. My breath hitched. I'd go to sleep in my bedroom and wake up in the hall. Once I woke up outside. Another time, I woke up standing at the attic ladder, my hand on the cord. I don't remember climbing down. I felt a sick pull in my stomach. I turned another page. They talk to me now, not just whispers. They say my name. They know I hear them. They know I'm afraid. I don't sleep anymore. I don't dream. They won't let me. And the worst part, the handwriting became frantic. I think I opened a door. Not a real one. A different kind. And I think something came through. I clamped the journal shut, shoving it away. No, this was just paranoia. Some old lunatic who scared himself to death in his own house. And yet, a creeping unease had settled into my bones, deep and unmoving. What if he wasn't crazy? What if he had really done something? And worse, what if the door was still open? I shoved my chair back, pacing the kitchen. I needed to clear my head, get some fresh air. I grabbed my keys and headed for the front door. The moment I stepped outside, I saw her, Mrs. Downing, my neighbor, standing at the edge of her yard, watching me. I hesitated. Then, before I could talk myself out of it, I walked toward her. She didn't speak at first, just looked at me with an expression that sent a shiver down my spine. Then she said, "You went in the attic." My blood ran cold. I tried to play it off. "It's just an attic." She shook her head. "Not in that house." I swallowed. "What do you mean?" She sighed, glancing at my house like she didn't want to look at it for too long. Then, in a quiet voice, she told me about Edgar Winslow, how he moved into the house alone like I did, how he started hearing things, seeing things, how the townspeople noticed he stopped coming outside, that when they finally did see him, he looked hollow, sleepless, terrified. And then one night, he ran out of the house screaming, barefoot, covered in scratches. He kept saying the same thing over and over. "It's awake. It's awake. It's awake." I swallowed against the tightness in my throat. "What happened to him?" Mrs. Downing hesitated. Then, softly, she said, "They found him in the woods." My stomach dropped. He didn't make it. The words settled over me like a shadow. The wind stirred, rustling the dead leaves around my feet. For a long moment, we just stood there. Then she met my eyes and said, "You should leave that house." I wanted to laugh, to tell her I wasn't some superstitious fool. But I didn't say anything, because deep down, I already knew she was right. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts tangled in knots. Edgar Winslow, the journal, the attic, it's awake. Mrs. Downing's voice echoed in my head. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, rattling the windows. The house settled around me with soft creaks and groans. I told myself it was normal. Houses made noise, old houses especially. But then, a sound, not the wind, not the house. Something else. Asterisk, asterisk. A slow, deliberate tap, tap, tap. I held my breath. It was coming from the attic. I sat up, my heart hammering. I didn't want to go up there, but I had to see. Swallowing my fear, I slid out of bed, careful not to make a sound. The hallway stretched before me, dark and endless. The attic hatch was just ahead. I reached the cord, and then, tap, 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 asterisk, asterisk. Closer now. I yanked my hand back, my pulse pounding in my ears. The air felt heavy, like something was pressing down on me. I should have turned around, gone back to bed. But instead, I grabbed the cord and pulled. The attic door swung open with a creak. A musty, dead smell rushed out. The ladder unfolded before me, a black hole of nothing gaping above. I stood there frozen, listening. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, a whisper, low, faint, like a breath in the dark. I couldn't move. I couldn't blink. And then, something shifted up there. Not a creak, not the house settling. Something moving. A slow, dragging scrape against the attic floor. The air turned ice cold. A whisper again, this time closer. And then, a voice, low, hollow, right above me. I see you. I slammed the attic shut and ran. I didn't stop running until I was back in my bedroom, slamming the door shut behind me. My breaths came fast and uneven, my hands trembling as I pressed my back against the door. I see you. The words echoed in my skull, a voice that didn't belong to me. I squeezed my eyes shut. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. But then why was my body locked in terror? Why was the air in my lungs so thin, like something had sucked the life out of the room? The silence in the house felt different now. Not empty, not quiet. Listening, I turned the lock on the bedroom door. It felt useless, a thin piece of metal against something wrong. I didn't sleep. I lay awake, gripping the covers, staring at the shadows in the corners of the room, watching, waiting. At some point, exhaustion must have taken over, because the next thing I knew, I was standing in the hallway, at the attic ladder. My hand was on the cord. A bolt of panic shot through me. No, I went to sleep. I was in bed. Asterisk, asterisk. How had I gotten here? My fingers clenched around the cord, as if they had a mind of their own. A sick, sinking feeling bloomed in my gut. I hadn't walked here. Something had brought me, and then a sound above me. Soft, slow, breathing. I yanked my hand away from the cord and stumbled back, crashing into the wall. The breathing stopped. The silence stretched, thick and waiting. I turned and bolted down the hallway. I threw open my bedroom door, nearly tripping over myself as I stumbled inside. I slammed the door behind me, twisting the lock again, my pulse thundering in my ears. This time, I unclosed my eyes. I sat on the edge of the bed, facing the door, waiting for something to happen. It didn't. Not at first. And then, a soft click. My bedroom door unlocked itself. The blood in my veins turned to ice. The handle twisted. Slowly. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. And then, it stopped. The handle turned back into place. The lock clicked shut again, as if whatever was on the other side had changed its mind. I sat there, frozen, until the first light of dawn crept through the window. Morning felt unreal. Sunlight streamed through the windows, stretching across the wooden floorboards, warming the room in a way that almost convinced me everything had been a dream. Almost. But the ache in my body told me otherwise. My legs were sore, like I'd been walking all night. My fingers felt stiff, as if I'd been holding on to something. I had no memory of getting out of bed, no memory of standing in the hallway, beneath the attic, but I had been there, and something had been there with me. I forced myself to move, to shower, to dress, to step into the daylight. I needed normalcy. I needed to breathe. I went into town, wandering without direction. People bustled along the streets, shopping, chatting, living their ordinary lives. I stopped at a cafe, ordered coffee, sat by the window, watching strangers go about their morning, as if nothing in the world could touch them, as if the shadows that linger in my house weren't creeping at their heels too. You look like you've seen a ghost. The voice startled me. I turned. It was Mrs. Downing. She stood there, clutching her worn purse, watching me with those sharp, knowing eyes. I forced a smile. Didn't sleep well. Bad dreams? She asked, sitting across from me before I could protest. Something like that. She stirred her tea. You went into the attic, didn't you? A chill crawled up my spine. I didn't answer. She didn't need me to. You should leave that house, she said, voice quiet, urgent. I let out a shaky breath. You keep saying that, but no one will tell me why. Mrs. Downing studied me for a long moment. Then she leaned in. Because you're not the first to wake up standing beneath that attic, she whispered. My blood ran cold. I gripped my coffee cup, trying to steady my hands. Who else? I asked. Mr. Keller before you, she said. Before him, a woman named Diane. And before her, she trailed off, shaking her head. None of them stayed long. I swallowed. What do they say? Mrs. Downing glanced around, as if making sure no one else was listening. Then she lowered her voice even more. They all said the same thing, she murmured. Something was calling them. I stared at her, my stomach twisting. Calling them where? She fixed me with a look that sent a cold weight pressing against my chest. The attic, she whispered. A heavy silence settled between us. I didn't know what to say. Finally, I found my voice. What happened to them? Mrs. Downing hesitated. Then she sighed, shaking her head. Keller ran out of the house in the middle of the night. Never came back. Diane, she hesitated. She didn't make it out. My breath caught in my throat. I stared at her. What do you mean? Mrs. Downing looked away. She disappeared, she said. Vanished. No one ever saw her leave. No sign of a struggle. No forced entry. One day, she was there. And the next, she snapped her fingers. Gone. A deep, hollow dread curled inside me. I thought of my bedroom door, unlocking on its own. The whisper in the attic. I see you. Mrs. Downing reached across the table, gripping my hand. You need to leave that house, she said. Her fingers were cold. I pulled my hand back, my mind racing. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that she was overreacting. But deep down, I knew she wasn't. Something was calling me, and I was terrified of what would happen if I answered. I drove home in a daze. Mrs. Downing's words clung to me, a whisper at the back of my mind. You need to leave that house. The idea had taken root. Leaving, packing up, and never coming back. It sounded easy, logical, but something inside me resisted. A quiet, lingering pull. I didn't want to go back, yet my hand still turned the wheel. My foot still pressed the gas pedal. My body moved without me. By the time I reached the house, the sun had already begun to dip below the trees. Shadows stretched long across the yard, creeping toward the porch. I sat in the car, gripping the steering wheel, heart hammering. A thought slid into my mind, unwelcome, intrusive. What if something is waiting for me inside? I clenched my jaw, pushing it down. This was my house. I wouldn't be afraid of it. I stepped out of the car and approached the front door. The moment I stepped inside, the air changed. Thick, heavy, like the house had been holding its breath. I set my keys on the table. The sound was too loud, too sharp in the silence. Then, a faint creak upstairs. I froze. The sound was slow, deliberate, a footstep. My mouth went dry. I turned my head toward the stairs. Every muscle in my body locked tight. There's no one here. I swallowed, stepping into the living room. The floor groaned beneath my feet, but I kept moving, keeping my eyes on the staircase. Another creak, higher this time, toward the attic. My stomach twisted. I didn't want to go up there, but I couldn't stop myself. Each step felt like a mistake. By the time I reached the top of the stairs, my breathing was shallow, my pulse pounding in my ears. I turned toward the hallway. The attic cord hung from the ceiling, swaying slightly. A rush of ice-cold fear shot through me. I stepped forward, and then it yanked itself up. I jumped back as a cord snapped upward, disappearing into the attic with a soft rustle. The door remained closed. The house was silent. My skin crawled. I took a slow, careful step back. Then another. I turned and hurried down the stairs, my heart thudding. I wouldn't sleep here tonight. I needed air. I needed out. I grabbed my keys and walked straight to the front door. I reached for the knob, but before I could turn it, click, the lock turned by itself. I yanked the handle. It didn't budge. Panic surged through me. I twisted the lock back. Tried again. Nothing. I was locked in. And then, a whisper, not from the attic this time, from right behind me. Don't go. My breath hitched. I turned, slowly, every inch of me screaming not to. The living room was empty, but the air felt full, like something was watching. I took a step back. My heel hit the door. A shadow shifted across the floor. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The whisper came again, closer. This time, it sounded almost pleading. Stay. I squeezed my eyes shut, and then the attic door slammed open. The sound thundered through the house. I jolted, my breath catching in my throat. Upstairs, the attic door gaped open like a mouth, yawning into blackness. I couldn't move, couldn't think. For a long, stretched out second, the house listened. And then, footsteps, slow, heavy, coming down the attic steps, coming toward me. I staggered back against the door, my fingers scrabbling at the handle. Still locked, still trapped. The footsteps didn't stop. I could hear them, steady, deliberate, pressing down on the wooden stairs one by one. I turned toward the hallway, heart hammering so hard it made my ribs ache. Nothing was there, but the sound was real. I swallowed hard. My mind screamed at me to run. But where? The front door wouldn't open. The windows? I forced my legs to move, sprinting toward the nearest window. I reached it, grabbed the latch, yanked, stuck. The wood wouldn't budge. I tried another window. Another. All the same. Sealed. I spun around, my breath coming fast and ragged. The footsteps had stopped, but the air had changed. I wasn't alone. A sharp chill coiled around my spine, creeping into my skin like ice. And then, a whisper inches from my ear. Turn around. I choked on a breath. My whole body locked. I didn't want to turn. Didn't want to see what was behind me. But something made me. A force, a pressure, like invisible hands tilting my chin. Slowly, my head moved. My breath hitched. At the far end of the hallway, near the attic stairs, a figure, tall, thin, the shape of a man, but wrong. Its limbs were too long, its posture unnatural. It didn't move, didn't breathe, just stood there, watching me. The air around it rippled, like heat distorting pavement. But it wasn't warmth I felt. It was cold, bitter, deep, ancient, asterisk, asterisk. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. And then it took a step, and another, moving toward me with slow, measured strides. My body screamed to run, but I couldn't. I could only stand there, frozen, my pulse slamming against my ribs. The figure stopped just a few feet away, close enough that I could see its face, or rather, the lack of one. Its skin was smooth, featureless, as if someone had erased its identity. But I felt its gaze, felt it sinking into me. "Don't leave," it whispered. The voice came from nowhere, everywhere, inside my own head. I squeezed my eyes shut. This isn't real. This isn't happening. A hand brushed my arm, cold, like touching a slab of ice. I gasped, jerking away, and just like that, it was gone. The house was silent. The attic door was closed again, like nothing had happened, but something had. And I knew, deep in my bones, it wasn't over. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch, curled up in a corner like a trapped animal, my ears straining against the silence. Every creak of the house made me flinch. Every shadow seemed to stretch and twist when I wasn't looking. The presence was still here, even if I couldn't see it, even if it wasn't speaking. It was watching, waiting. I told myself I would leave in the morning, pack a bag, grab my keys, and never come back. But when the sun finally crept through the curtains, something changed. The fear, so sharp and real in the dark, felt distant now, like a bad dream, like my mind had exaggerated everything. Hadn't I been exhausted? Hadn't I let the house, its age, its quirks, get under my skin? The thought felt wrong, like it wasn't entirely my own. But it was convincing, enough that when I finally moved, it wasn't to pack a bag. It was to make coffee, to step back into my routine, to pretend that nothing had happened. The house was quiet. Sunlight streamed through the windows, golden and warm. For the first time in days, I felt almost normal. I shook off the night before, convinced that whatever I'd seen, whatever I'd felt, had been a result of stress, exhaustion, my overactive imagination. By noon, I wasn't even thinking about it. But the house was, because it wasn't finished with me. Not yet. It started small. A whisper of movement just outside my vision. The feeling that something had shifted in the room when I wasn't looking. I would set my coffee cup down, only to find it an inch from where I remembered. Doors that I had closed would be slightly open. A chair pulled away from the table, just enough to be wrong. Little things, barely noticeable, easy to brush off. But the unease grew. By evening, the air in the house felt different again. Thicker, charged, like static before storm. And then, the humming started. Soft, distant, coming from nowhere. Every time I stopped to listen, it stopped too. But the moment I looked away, there was again a quiet, tuneless hum, like someone was standing just around the corner. By midnight, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my keys, my jacket, and went to the door. This time, when I turned the knob, it opened. A breath of cold air hit my face. And then, a whisper from right inside the house. "Stay." I didn't look back. I stepped outside, slammed the door behind me, and didn't stop walking until I reached my car. I drove without thinking, away from the house, away from it. I didn't stop until I reached a diner on the edge of town. Somewhere bright, somewhere normal. I sat in a booth, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee, trying to calm my racing heart. I needed answers. I needed to know what the hell was happening to me, and I knew exactly where to start. Mrs. Downing. The diner was nearly empty at this hour. A waitress in a faded blue uniform shuffled between tables, refilling coffee cups for the few late-night stragglers. The hum of an old radio played softly in the background, blending with a low murmur of conversations. I sat hunched over my coffee, hands wrapped tightly around the warm ceramic, my mind racing. Mrs. Downing. She had known something. The way she had looked at me when I told her I was moving into the house. The hesitation in her voice when she spoke about the previous tenants. She knew more than she let on. I had to talk to her. The clock above the counter read 2:17 a.m. Too late to knock on her door. But I couldn't go back to the house. Not yet. I pulled out my phone, searching for any information I could find about the house. I hadn't looked into its history before moving in. The cheap price had been enough to convince me, and I had been too preoccupied with my own problems to question why it was so affordable. Now I regretted it. I typed in the address and hit search. The first few results were normal. Real estate listings, tax records, nothing useful. But then I found something. A news article from 1989. I clicked on it, my pulse pounding. The headline sent a chill down my spine. Local teacher vanishes from home. Only her journal remains. My hands trembled as I read. Her name was Margaret Holloway. She had lived in the house for only 6 months before disappearing without a trace. No forced entry. No signs of a struggle. The only thing left behind was her journal, found open on her bedside table. My stomach twisted. I kept reading. Neighbors had reported strange sounds coming from the house in the weeks before her disappearance. Whispers, footsteps, the feeling of being watched. One witness, a friend who had visited her the night before she vanished, claimed that Margaret had become paranoid, convinced that something was in the house with her, that she wasn't alone. I swallowed hard. This was too familiar. I scrolled further. The journal had been sealed away by the authorities. No details about what was written inside were ever released. I sat back, my breath shallow. Margaret Holloway had lived in my house. She had heard the whispers, felt the presence, and then she was gone. I needed to know more. I needed to see that journal. But how? The police wouldn't just hand it over. Unless... I exhaled sharply, already making up my mind. First, I would talk to Mrs. Downing. Then, I would find that journal. I didn't know what I was expecting to discover, but I knew one thing for certain. Whatever happened to Margaret Holloway, the same thing was happening to me. The night air was crisp, carrying the distant scent of rain. I sat in my car outside Mrs. Downing's house, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. Her house was small, the windows dark, except for a faint glow from the living room. I hesitated, debating whether I should wait until morning, but I knew I wouldn't sleep, not while the questions burned in my mind. I took a deep breath and stepped out of the car. The ground was damp beneath my feet as I made my way to her front door. I knocked, once, twice, then silence, a shuffle from inside, the sound of a lock turning. The door cracked open, and Mrs. Downing's tired eyes met mine. "Do you have any idea what time it is?" she muttered, pulling her robe tighter around herself. I'm sorry, I said quickly. I need to talk to you. It's about the house. Her expression shifted. A flicker of something. Concern, or maybe fear. She glanced behind me, as if making sure I was alone, then sighed and stepped back. Come in. I followed her inside. The house smelled like old books and lavender. A small lamp cast a dim glow over the room, highlighting the lace curtains and wooden furniture. She motioned for me to sit, then settled into the chair across from me. Now, she said, rubbing her temples. Tell me what's happened. I swallowed hard. I told her everything. The whispers, the footsteps, the shadow in the mirror, the feeling of something in the house with me. With every word, her face grew paler. By the time I mentioned Margaret Holloway's name, she was gripping the armrest so tightly her fingers trembled. I knew her, she murmured. Margaret. She was a good woman, a kind woman. I leaned forward. What happened to her? Mrs. Downing hesitated. Then her voice dropped to a whisper. She was terrified. A chill ran down my spine. She told me the house wasn't normal. She exhaled shakily. Asterisk, asterisk wants people to stay. Asterisk, asterisk. I frowned. What do you mean? She tried to leave. Many times. The word sent a sharp jolt of fear through me. She would pack her bags. Swear she was done with it. But the next morning, she would still be there. She said something wouldn't let her go. A lump formed in my throat. The way I had convinced myself to stay. The way the fear had faded by morning like a dream. Like something had planted a thought in my mind. She shook her head. She started reading into the house's history. And then she found that journal. I sat up. You saw it. Mrs. Downing hesitated. Once. What was in it? Her lips parted, but no words came out. She swallowed, lowering her gaze. She wrote about the dreams, she whispered. The things she saw when she closed her eyes. She said it wasn't just a house. It was a trap, a living thing, and it wanted her there. A shudder ran through me. She wrote about someone else too, Mrs. Downing added. Who? The original owner. I leaned in. The one obsessed with the occult? Mrs. Downing nodded. Jonathan Graves. The name sent a ripple of unease through me. He built the house himself, she continued, her voice thin. People say he wasn't right in the head, that he believed in doors, ways to call things that shouldn't be called. I swallowed hard. He disappeared too, she murmured, vanished into thin air, just like Margaret. The air in the room felt colder. My mind raced. Margaret had figured something out, something about the house. And then she was gone. I stood abruptly. Where's the journal now? Mrs. Downing looked away. The police took it. My stomach sank. But, she said slowly, there's a copy. I stared at her. Margaret had made a copy. Mrs. Downing met my gaze, hesitant. It's in the library. A slow, creeping dread curled around my spine. I knew where I had to go next. And I knew, deep down, that whatever I found in that journal, it would change everything.